We were ready and. Bianca,
Yep, I believe we're recording.
we're recording. Go ahead and call this Board of Supervisors meeting to order and. Appreciate everyone being here, and I've asked Supervisor David Gomez to lead us in the pledge.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Supervisor Gomez. It's nice to have a little cooler weather outside, isn't it? Coming up. I enjoyed the drive up this morning, had the window down and air was cool. And it didn't feel like I was in a steamer, so.
The wind blowing through your hair.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Ron, you burned it off earlier. Anyway, with that, we'll now go to agenda item B, called the public. And Mr. Kuzo or Mr. Yes, please. Oh, is he?
Good morning, supervisors. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to thank you for your support of the Greenlee County Tourism Council. We are doing everything we can, due diligence, to make sure we take very good care of your wonderful, magnanimous contribution to us. The scope of work is being finely honed, and we are arriving at a place where we can all agree that this is what we need to do in order to move the river project ahead. And I wanted to give you an update on that. And I said I kind of want to bait and switch too, because I also need to wear my colors of copper hat for a moment. Before we know it, the 4th and 5th of November, it will be here. We are working to get the two best wineries in the state of Arizona, both Sonoita, which is the first winery in the state that was sanctioned, and Sonora, which just competed in a competition, Sunset International Wine Tasting, 3,000 entries. Sonora Winery took best of show. They had a wine that got double gold. Every one of their wines got a medal, and they did take best of show. One of their wines was judged 97 out of 100 points. So I don't know. I've never had a 97-point wine, but pretty amazing. They will be back also. And so we're getting that already. I will be hoping that you will support us again this year and allow a little police protection drive-by when they're in the neighborhood, just to have a presence. We don't want to take up, their whole time, but just to be aware that we're there along the highway. And we'll be hoping that we can borrow that wonderful chain link fence that keeps people from wandering around, getting us in trouble with the liquor board. So thank you so much for your time this morning. Thanks for all that you do and your support. And Mr. Gomez, I am so sorry that I have been out of pocket and you haven't been able to reach me. So let me know what I am remiss in doing, because I want to try to make amends. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else and call the public? Yes, Daniel.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Daniel Cervantes Clifton, resident. Chairman Ron, before I begin, can I approach?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I want to share with you an agenda released just recently by a newly formed committee called the Founders Day Celebration Committee. This group will meet today at the Clifton Town Council Chambers at 1:30 p.m. and the group will discuss and expects to take action regarding the planning of the Founder's Day celebration that will be observed this coming Saturday, November 4th. Is that right, Steve? Okay. The committee will seek input from the Clifton and area residents may be seeking financial assistance from the public as well. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for allowing me to address you this morning. And I'm sorry, the Wildcats, we lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jeff Sumner.
All right, Tim Sumner, Greeley County Sheriff, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I wanted to discuss a couple things, time permitting. One is the big P word. You guys like to use precedents. I did look back over agenda items. I think you have as far back as 2011 on your website for your agendas, and I was kind of just out of curiosity. I know you can't answer the question, but I'd like to know how the current total spent to date on sheriff's lawsuit of $201,000 was an agenda item up for discussion or decision, as your official agenda form document is for. The precedent word I said is that there's been other lawsuits when the board was sued at the carnival from the fair, from the former economic development coordinator. There's been different lawsuits that have happened, litigations that have happened. I've never seen just a statement that's really truly not up for discussion or decision, just as a generalized statement on your official document on your agenda. And so I think it's pretty interesting. I actually believe it's actually against the title chapter 7 against the ombudsman's and the open meeting law, honestly. But however, if you're actually really intent on wanting to make sure there's a statement on your agendas, you could agendize the thing to put presentation on the current amount or something like that. That'd be properly agendized. Or the other thing I'd asked your clerk for is if there's a total spent to date, I think it should be broken up. Shouldn't just say sheriff's lawsuit. I think it should say sheriff's versus board of supervisors. There should be 3 columns there. One saying sheriff has spent 82,000. The board's attorneys have spent 116,000. The total is 201,000, something like that. It's kind of slanted. It makes it, I think there's an appearance, and I think it's probably intentional. Directed for a particular political motivation and reason to have that there by whomever put it there. And actually, I'd like to know too, and I'll do a request if need be, is see once the agenda goes from your clerk to your president and your administrator, to see if that was put in there by the clerk or put in by someone else after it leaves the clerk's hands. That's happened on more than one occasion, such as the K Gale contract that left your clerk's hands, went to the administrator, and then that was added on the consent agenda item you weren't aware of. So I think there's certain things that come up on your agenda. However, it is your agenda. You need to be aware that believe that's parts illegal. I'm not afraid of those numbers being out there. I think it should be properly agendized and properly discussed, not just as a statement. You never put generalized statements on your agenda just for general information for the public or for yourselves or anyone else. So it just seemed kind of odd to me. On a second note, the fair went really well. Morenci football game went well. It was great to see the ribbon cutting ceremony up there. Had to bounce back and forth, but it was a great turnout. Too bad they did lose, but it was a great event. Fairgrounds, down there, a lot of people turned out. As far as our perspective, everything went really well from the law enforcement side. Other than some vehicular traffic on the inside, but I mean, it went really well. Didn't have any problems, and I think it was overall a good event, and people enjoyed themselves. It was a good turnout. So, anyways, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on colored public? Seeing none, we'll go to agenda item 2. The Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of Green County Public Health Service District, and after the order of business, will reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. Consent agenda.
I so move that we approve the consent agenda as posted. I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We are now convened as the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of the Green County Flood Control District, and after the order of business, we'll reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. A consent agenda.
So move that we approve the consent agenda as posted.
I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We are now convened as the Board of Supervisors, and we will go to agenda item 4. And we will hear Mr. Steve Guzel, American Legion, presentation on the Modest Bluff Veteran Memorial Site. Thank you for your service and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to come speak today. My name is Steve Guzel. I represent Modest Bluff Veterans Memorial Incorporated. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Our main purpose is to, by creating the bluff, the memorial. The memorial is a memorial that spans over a little over a half a mile, with each section representing each war: World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and the flag site, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the flag site. Our main purpose is for a healing and to educate the public about our military. As of right now, we have over 2,000 dog tags hung from the cable that span across all the flags, every service flag and the American flag. And there are dog tags from all over the United States, from every war and every conflict. This memorial is one of a kind. There's no other one like it. It honors all veterans of all wars and all conflicts. It honors those that have victorious awards, and it honors, gives recognition to all veterans who served in our military. So it is one of a kind. A few days ago, as far as educating the public, we put up a silhouette was donated to us from a mother whose son was, after he came back, about a year, he went through the system. And as of right now, the system is kind of broke. It's inadequate as far as dealing with our military that come back with PTSD and other mental diseases. There are, as far as the physical side of it, they take care of us very well, but on the mental side, it still lacks a lot. They do have programs which are one-on-one or group therapy for PTSD. But as I say, this is relatively new. There's always been PTSD. In the wars before, it was called shell shock or combat fatigue. After Vietnam, it was called PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And the newer ones, they suffer from traumatic brain injury due to roadside bombs and so forth. So when they come back, people come back, there is no system right now set up to educate our veterans when they come back. When we go in, they program us, and we're of course programmed to defend our country at our life. But so when we come back, they don't. There is no deprogramming. So when a combat veteran comes back, he's actually still in combat. He's still in a war zone, and there's difficulty in readjusting to society because of that. And as a result of that, there's 44 that we know of. That's just within the VA system. There's 44 people a day that commit suicide. because of the lack of being able to deal with their PTSD. We're talking World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and Iraq and Afghanistan. From those numbers, the highest numbers come from 9/11 forward. So that means Iraq, Afghanistan, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and Iraq, Afghanistan. Those are the highest numbers of suicides. And the highest numbers from those are from women. So the highest numbers are women. So when we put the mother of Adam Hill is a silhouette that is at the base of the mountain. Okay. And the purpose of that is to educate people of how many people actually commit suicide because of lack of having to deal with them, or how to deal with them. The statue or the silhouette is 12 feet high. It weighs 1,800 pounds and is 1.5 inches thick metal. And hopefully by putting this silhouette at the base, it will educate people in some way. Because at this time, there's a lot of programs that deal with suicides. There's a crisis hotline, but this is relatively very new also. Greenlee County and Modest Bluff Veterans Memorial, and one more in Oklahoma are the only ones that even begin to mention suicides. It's a subject that more or less is put swept under the rug. The government doesn't want to deal with it right now, but it's a reality, and this is something we all have to deal with. And it's actually our responsibility to look after our military personnel. They go and they fight for our country, and it's our responsibility to see that when they come back, they're taken care of on that note. Presently, we are undertaking another project, which is a 3-phase project. Phase 1, we were donated a Bell Huey helicopter, which is synonymous of Vietnam. This is what they used to bring us in and out of the bush or out of the jungle. It was main transportation for combat veterans to go in and out. But it was donated to us by Lighthouse. The Lighthouse Incorporated. They donated the helicopter to us, and we will be bringing in this helicopter in November 4th. The helicopter itself will be placed on top of Modest Bluff on the Vietnam section. This is phase 1. We will bring it in. They'll bring it in, and after we have a celebration on November 4th, which is also Clifton's 150th anniversary. After this celebration, it will be taken to the Greenlee County Yard Sheriff's Department, and we'll leave it there for phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 3 will happen around January, which Swap Construction has agreed to donate their time and equipment to dig a hole on top of Modest Bluff, which is the Vietnam section. The hole will be a 4x6, 4 foot wide and 6 foot deep. We will put a rebar cage inside of it, and this will hold the pillar, which will hold the Huey. The pillar will be 10 feet above the ground. So that's the second phase. Okay, once the pillar is set in there, it has to dry for at least 30 days to cure. And then phase 3 is we will set the UH1 on top of the pillar, which when you see it from here, you see it over there, it'll be banking. Look like it's coming in banking. So, and all this will be done by helicopter. The reason that, of course, that we are doing by helicopter, it's the most feasible way of putting it. Trying to build a road around through Wirtz Canyon and going up, we'd have to go through state land, and there was more difficulty there. Number one. Number two is that it's a sacred land, and you don't build a road on sacred land. Number three is that we're trying to keep the terrain as natural as possible, not to upset any of the terrain. So that's one of the reasons. And so the third phase will happen tentatively. We're shooting for Memorial Day in 2024. It's a long project, and it's a long, expensive project, because we're going to use everything we do, we're going to do by helicopter. So the last phase will bring in a Sikorsky, which is a sky crane, to pick up the UH1, and we'll set it on top of the pillar, which will hold it 10 feet above the air. And of course, after we put it up, we'll have to maintain it and see that it's, we'll put cameras and so forth to maintain it and make sure that it's secure. But what we are requesting from the board is any kind of financial assistance that is possible. We would greatly appreciate this, and we feel that this will enhance our tourist trade coming in, because it will attract a lot of people, and it will be an addition to Greeley County and Clifton. As of right now, Midas Bluff is a landmark. It's a landmark. And it's also on Arizona trails, so it's very well noted. It's known in it was known in a movie by PBS. PBS went up and did a movie on two fronts. So this memorial has been seen all over the country. It was aired for a month on Spanish American Heritage. So it's very well known all over the country. And and also it's the movie itself was it was being redone in different languages. So as the present, it's going there, across the world. So anyway, I'd like to close with that. And I want to thank the board very much for allowing me to speak today. And I will be setting some flyers in the back there for anyone to view. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Guzzo. Do you have, do you, on these three phases, do you have a estimated cost that if each phase will?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. The projected guesstimate or estimate is phase 1 will cost about between 5,000 to 6,000.
Okay.
That's for set. That's our phase 1. We're gonna have bands, a couple of bands come in, and of course they're going to be bringing in the helicopter from Phoenix. So we're talking about the cost of gasoline, bringing in the people that donated the helicopter, the drivers, and others that are going to help with that. We're also, at that time, we're going to bring in the pillar. The pillar is coming in from Maine. The pillar itself was donated by someone, but we're still, excuse me, we still are paying for the cost of gasoline and of course, room and board for all these people. And setting up the, different costs like porta potties and other costs, other small costs. So phase one, we're looking at about 550, let's say 5,500, somewhere in that area. Phase two, we will be paying for the phase two. We'll be paying for the people that are coming in that are going to fly the helicopters to transport the swamp construction
Excavator probably.
excavators and up there to drill it, and then the cement. So that we project around 5,000, also 5,000 to 6,000, and then phase because we have to pay for fuel costs, JP fuel, and somewhere in that area, and then phase three we'll also have another celebration. We're planning another celebration, and of course the cost of bringing in a Sikorsky, and as of right now, that all this is being done by it's volunteer, but we still have to pay for the cost of fuel and things like that. So we're talking another 5,000, 5,000 to 6,000.
So we're talking maybe 18,000.
Somewhere around there. Yeah, somewhere around there. That's the cost. And a lot of the right now we're trying to do different things like sell t-shirts like the ones I have on. This will, all the proceeds will go directly to the project, and our organization has always we have different functions, and we raise money from the community, but we put back into the community. We give scholarships. Yearly, we usually give 1,500 to Morenci, 1,500 to Duncan. We used to give 1,500 to Clifton, and just anybody that has a need, we try and fulfill that need. Our organization is basically to give back to the community and see what we can do for our community. That's about it.
May I ask, is it a 5013C? So
Yes.
whatever donations are,
Yeah, it's 501c3, yes. And it's Modest Bluff Veterans Memorial. Even though we are in the American Legion, it's a different organization. We started the organization, actually, this organization started in in the 70s. When we came back, Vietnam veterans weren't considered a war. So we couldn't join the American Legion or the VFW. They didn't consider it a war. They considered a police action.
Right, yeah.
So we created our own organization, which was called In-Country Vietnam Veterans. At that time, there was about 60 veterans from Greenlee County. I'm talking about 66, 68, 1968. So, and that organization has moved. This Modest Bluff is actually the beginning of Modest Bluff actually started in around 75. And our purpose has always been, well, especially at that time, is to change the image of the Vietnam vet. Because at that time, it was a very unpopular war. So by working with our community and giving back to our community, our hopes was to change the image of the Vietnam vet, which at that time was baby killers and drug addicts, alcoholics, and so forth and so forth. We were stereotyped at that time by our society, which is sad, but that's the way it was. But gentlemen, any more questions?
Well, yeah, I would, first of all, thank you for what your organization represents. Thank you for what you do to help others, to keep reminding us of the importance of veterans and what the sacrifices they make. And also, yes, the mental, sometimes a lot worse than the physical problems that have wars causes. But I hope you can feel a heartfelt thank you for your service and all those who have served in any capacity in the military. And that's,
I want to echo your comments, just to say thank you for all that you do in our community, for our county, what you do for our veterans, and thank you for your service. I thank David for his service and whoever else is out there. But I know that mental health is a big issue, and this isn't a commercial, but we do this is our 7th annual suicide awareness walk that we're doing in Morenci on Veterans Day. And we're actually going to have a veterans presence at this walk this year. So it's Pascal Torres with Veteran Suicide is actually going to attend and have some folks there as well. So we really want to highlight that and raise awareness and help to prevent wherever possible, but to be there to help. But I just wanted to say thank you for all that you're doing here to this community and supporting the veterans. So it's very, very important.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem.
And I echo all the comments that have been made, Stephen. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
yes.
Our staff would like to apologize. We listed you as representing the American Legion. We know you're a member of the American Legion.
Yes.
But we knew you were here representing the Veterans Memorial Lawrence Club. For those of us too young to remember the Vietnam conflict, not only thank you for your service, but thank you for keeping it at the present sense of our minds, helping us remember. That is so critical to our heritage, particularly in this community. And you've always been an outstanding voice for veterans in our community, recognized throughout. There's a sense of reverence when you speak, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Gentlemen, I thank you very much. And
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
And now I will leave some flyers back there for everyone to.
And you'll be hearing from us.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll go to agenda item 5 and Tony Hines, Public Works Manager, and
Mr. Chairman, we have a request to speak.
that's on F. So I figured we'd go down, and then when F came,
Sounds good.
we'd allow.
Good morning, Tony Hines, Fleet Manager. For item A, I had a man lift on the agenda. Before we were going to go out for bid, as I talked to vendors on this item, we were going out for bid for a used one. As I talked to the vendors on this item, used ones, that market is not exactly set up for a bid process. So what we're asking to do is go get a used man lift through the Omnia contract through Empire. New man lifts are well over $100,000. This year in budget, I think we put 60,000 not to exceed. So that's what we're asking to do.
Does anybody have any?
Well, I move that we approve of the purchase of a man lift through Empire using the Omnia purchasing contract in an amount not to exceed $60,000.
I second that motion.
A motion is second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. We will now go to 5B.
Item B is for the approval of the award of the bid for a pickup for the roads department. We had one bidder for this particular truck, Kempton Chevrolet, in the amount of $52,586.27.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Just a question, how many bids were sent out and we only got one response?
One response to each one of the 5 that we sent out.
5, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and that was my question. I mean,
Yeah.
why only one? Is there any further discussion? If not, a motion would be in order.
Well, I move that we approve of the award and award the bid for pickup for the roads department in the amount of $52,586.26 as presented.
I second that motion.
A motion and a second.
I should add to Kempton Chevrolet.
Yeah, Kempton Chevrolet. We have motion and second. Just one question, and I thought of it. So you only received one bid. Is this competitive? What I mean is, do you know this is about where the mark, this is a competitive bid or? And since we only got one bid. Is the bid very valid? It's not fluffed up, it's a valid bid.
No, it's a competitive bid, in my opinion. Normally, when we get multiple bids, Kempton's has always been near the
Okay.
lowest one, so we feel very comfortable with Kempton's and their prices. We always get our bid assistance, we always get the government price and stuff like that, so.
And I have to ask that because we would not be doing our fiduciary responsibility
Right.
if we didn't ask those types of questions. Yes,
On the structure of sealed bidding, the bidder, in this case, Kempton.
but
would
it
not
was a
have-
sealed bid, okay,
Correct, so they would not have known whether
okay,
or not any other competitor, so they would have given us the best price. In anticipation of other people trying to get the bid.
okay. I did not realize it was a sealed bid, I should have. Thank
Sorry,
you.
we always do sealed bids on vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Now, we have a motion on the floor. Being no, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. We now go to 5C.
So item C is a new pickup for the engineering department that we had one bid on from Kempton Chevrolet, totaling $60,654.12. This one is a little bit different than the roads department one because of the items that the engineer would like on this pickup.
Okay,
Anything, anything out of the ordinary? I mean, does he?
No, ground clearance was the main thing, so trail boss type vehicle would be the,
I see it's a 1 ton for the.
it's a 1/2 ton.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I saw the big one, the quantity, you're right.
All right.
Anyway, my bad. All right,
motion,
what I move that we approve to award Kempton Chevrolet the bid for a pickup for the engineering department in the amount of $60,654.12 as presented
Kempton.
to Kempton.
I second that motion.
There you have motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. We will now go to 5E. No, D. I marked it too quick.
So D is a vehicle for the health department, a mid-size SUV. So a Blazer was what was bid from Kempton Chevrolet. And on this bid, they had a additional error. They forgot to add a digit on the total. So the total is $41,255.99.
We'll say at that price, we get 10 of them. So,
Right, that's 4,100. Right.
Is there any discussion?
no,
If not, a motion would be in order.
I move that we approve to award Kempton the bid for the mid-size SUV for the health department in the amount of $41,255.99 as presented.
I second that motion.
Have motion and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We will now go to 5E.
Item E is a new pickup for the animal control department. For Kempton's was the only bidder again, totaling 52,586.27.
Okay, and I just had one question on that. And so is that a crew cab on that, or is it just?
It's a double cab, yeah.
It's a, yeah, I know, and I couldn't, and why is that? I just out of curiosity, does he carry more than maybe two people in there at a time, or is it because of equipment? Is it-
Equipment and supplies that he would
Okay.
carry in a secured area, yeah.
I just want to know. Okay, that's all the questions I have. If not, a motion would be in order.
I move that we approve to award Kempton the bid for a pickup for the animal control department in the amount of $52,586.27 as.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing now, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We now go to 5F, and the sheriff has asked to address this. Sheriff? Good morning.
Good morning. Tim Sumner, Greeley County Sheriff. Here to just speak on 5F, not the other items before, because those are all appropriate. The agendized under departments, under your elected positions. Those are all departments that you oversee. The sheriff's office is a separate elected office, not a department under your oversight. And so once again, I've stated on record and saying it again, the reason why I'm speaking on this is that this should be coming through the elected official, even by your own procurement policies, and that you're in violation of that. The sheriff is the one, the elected official should be doing this bidding and presenting it to the board to approve or not approve vehicles for the use of that elected office, for the sheriff's office, in this case, under number F. The reason why I've had these concerns and discussing this right here, that it should be coming from the sheriff's office and the elected official. There's been numerous issues that we want to make sure that the bids are being handled properly. On this bid, I do see Kempton's the only one that did put in a bid for. The price looks very reasonable and looks like it'd be consistent with other prices we would get from other vendors or other places. They were the only one. I don't see an issue with this particularly. I see an issue with the process of it, and knowing that we have other vehicles that have to be restriped and other things right now because things have not been handled as they should to the sheriff's office. Going to the middleman of the fleet manager is not the appropriate venue for us to go, or the platform for us to go through is going to the fleet department. So with that being said, again, this should be agendized separately, 5A through E, and then a different item for the sheriff's office, the Sheriff Tim Sumner, to discuss a vehicle bid option and bringing it for PPV SUVs before the board to make a decision on. So that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Tim. Tony.
So on item E, we have 4 PPV SUVs that we bid on. Kempton was the only bidder again. We have the amount of $59,180 each vehicle.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The chair entertains the motion. Our fleet, our purchasing policy does not actually give authority to the sheriff to do this. It's assigned to the department. The purchasing of vehicles has been assigned by the board to the fleet department. So the specifications, gathering and presenting have been done by the appropriate department. This is not a misassigned task.
That was a question over that. I had a question. So just to clarify, this is 4 vehicles purchased by Greenlee County, titled under Greenlee County and assigned to the sheriff's department, sheriff's office, right?
Correct.
Okay. And will they have pre-installed GPS?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The with the ongoing strike right now, we're really keeping an eye on that. So we're hoping that they
Yeah.
aren't going to be affected, but it may be a little while before we get these.
And what's the total? 4 times whatever that number?
236, 720.
Thank you.
236, 720.
Well, if there's no further discussion, a motion would be in order.
All right, well, I move that we approve to award to Kempton's the bid for 4 PPV SUVs for the sheriff's office in the total amount of $236,720, which equates to $59,180 per vehicle as presented.
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you very, very much
you.
for what you do,
Thank you.
Tony. Appreciate it. With that, we'll go to agenda item 6, Mr. Repair County Administrator to review CSA legislative proposals. Thank you.
These, thank you. Thank you.
What I'll present on the. Gotta make a lot of noise in the process here.
We need to oil some chairs around here. Same thing going on over here.
If mine was squeaking, they just call me a tight one.
White grease, white grease. So, rid of that. That's- So what I've handed you is.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Is a brief, each of these proposals is one-liners up here on the. Adam, you know how to get rid of that? Perfect, thank you. What I've given you here is one-liners of each proposals. What I gave you in hand is a little one-page summary of each of the proposals. You have probably received, if not, I'll send it to you later, a more in-depth analysis of why each of the counties presented what they did. This year's theme is Pima County and everybody else. You'll see I've added down here at the bottom, it was off because they added one a little bit late. And so I didn't know how to put it into a box and make it look like the rest of them, but in short, Pima County has proposed 7 different legislative proposals. And the rest of the counties have put in, I think, 8. So we'll go through these fairly quickly. They will be discussed at the County Supervisors Association meeting on Thursday. And of course, final action on the CSA legislative agenda will take place at the summit in October, in just a couple of weeks. The first 2 are actually ones that have been tried by the League of Cities and Towns. It makes a lot of sense. Both deal with how we deal with bid notices and sale notices. So if we're asking to buy something, we have to put a notice in the paper. And then there's a paper only process for people to submit bids and so forth. Pima County's saying, why don't we move into the 21st century? Do this online, post it on our own website and receive bids electronically. The second proposal is the other half of that. If we've got something to sell, surplus vehicles or desks or whatever it is, we would like to be able to put it out on our own website, and then, you know, we can conduct that electronically as well. The newspaper associations oppose it. Obviously, putting notice in the paper is a revenue source for them. Most papers, even that still print, have online presences, so that's where they're putting this. They're also putting their print paper. But it would take very little effort to direct the public to a county's website if they're looking to bid on something or buy something. So those 2, I think will probably engender widespread support among the County Supervisors Association, but it has traditionally been quite a fight at the legislature. The housing trust, now these next 3 or 4 actually, are uniquely somewhat Pima County oriented. So the first is asking the state to dedicate funds out of the Housing Trust Fund to be used in conjunction with other funds to support rental assistance. I think this one's going to have a hard time getting legs in the current legislature. It essentially is asking the state to dedicate funds to support those who struggled through the pandemic, but we're past the pandemic. You see the ERA programs there, that's Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which is going away. And so this is an attempt to try and stand up a smaller version of that with state funds as the federal funds begin to evaporate. Again, I think this one's going to have a difficult time in the legislature. It doesn't affect us nearly as much as it does the metropolitan areas. We are, of course, seeing a dramatic rise in homelessness in our metropolitan areas, and even not our biggest metropolitan areas. It's rising everywhere, but I think this is intended to address that. The next one, Restore County Public Health Authority. This is one that Pima County, I think this is the 3rd year they proposed it. I know it was on the agenda last year. You recall that during the pandemic, Pima County was doing some things that were innovative in their view, inappropriate in the view of others. But essentially, the legislature brought back in some local county authority to address pandemics and other health crises. It was primarily a philosophical approach of what should be done, what should not be done, and the legislature drew those powers back. Again, I think in this current legislative environment, I think it's highly unlikely that this goes anywhere. This did not get out of the summit last year as part of the CSA agenda. Child care subsidy reimbursement rates. This again is a way to try and bolster those who are taking care of the most vulnerable children. It would dedicate, and it does not specify an exact amount, but it would dedicate sufficient monies out of the general fund, of the state general fund, to support DES when they set up foster homes and other child care facilities that care for children in crisis. It's an idea that no doubt has an audience, a need. Whether this will find any positive reception in the legislature or not, I don't know. And then removal of the capital post-conviction representation cap. This is a problem that shows up in criminal realm. It shows up only at the moment in our largest county, although La Paz County has one capital case that they prosecuted and is now through the process. So in short, you go through an investigation, there's charges, there's a trial, there's conviction, and a person is sentenced to die, capital offense. They have a long series of appeals, but one of that appeals process is what they call post-conviction relief. And it's very specific relief that they can ask for. It's things like, my attorney didn't represent me constitutionally well enough. My sentencing was illegal, those kinds of things. They tend to be long drawn out processes. They can jump out of the state courts into the federal courts, and they can go for many, many years. The current law says that counties are not allowed to pay any more than $100 an hour for those kind of attorneys. They are very specialized and so forth. What they're asking is to switch it from not more than to not less than, instead of taking the ceiling and making it a floor. It hasn't hit us. It's unlikely it hits us anytime soon. But for those that have quite a few, Maricopa, Pima, Mojave, Yavapai, this can be a fiscal factor for them, but it also allows them to retain good attorneys. The last one down there, county HERF distributions. When this was presented at our manager meeting last week, one of my colleagues was sitting next to me, leaned over and says, this sounds like Pima County trying to take money away from Maricopa County. There's a component of it that says new distributions. That's not defined. We're not sure if that means that if HERF begins to apply to electric vehicles, that money would be affected, or whether it's new money as of 2024. We're not sure what that means. But essentially, that what they would do is the formula that distributes HERF. Now, the total amount that goes to counties would not change. And I believe that is 17% of the total HERF revenue. But how it would be distributed would be affected by how much of your population lives in unincorporated parts of your county. So you take Maricopa County, for example, I think less than 10% of their population lives in unincorporated parts of the county. There are county islands throughout the place. There's some communities outside the metropolitan, but most is metropolitan incorporated cities. Pima County, by contrast, has a lot more outside of the metropolitan area. For Greenlee County, the formula would likely benefit us somewhat because overwhelmingly most of our population, like about 70%, is outside of incorporated cities. Would it make a big difference to us? Probably not. Simply because our share of that 70% is so small. But we've never turned our nose up at an extra nickel or dime. So. But I think this one will likely become a pushing match between our two biggest sister counties, because that's really where it will begin to affect. As we scroll down to the other county stuff, La Paz County, we've seen proposed water legislation for several years from our western counties. Most of it dealing with transfers, AMAs, or more local control on groundwater usage. This is a unique, somewhat different approach. La Paz County is asking for $1 million spread out over 4 different projects, 250 apiece, to measure the amount of water in 4 separate aquifers. One has been quite well studied, the Harquahela. It's an INA, an irrigation non-expansion area, and it actually has built into that some transfer rights in it. The others have not been as well studied. There was a study done on one of the other 4, but it's old, and some people question how accurate it is. Essentially, La Paz County wants to know for the 4 aquifers that sit underneath their geographic footprint, they want to know how much water is there. It is part of a trend in the state, and Chairman Blunt knows this better than all of us, to try and quantify and measure every drop of water in the state, with the idea being that if you measure it, you can more equitably distribute it, whoever gets to decide what equitably is. But La Paz County's request this year through CSA. Now, I expect Mojave, La Paz, probably Yuma, Coconino, and Yavapai to work independent of CSA on water legislation again. This would be the 4th or 5th year they've tried to do something. The next one from Graham County is somewhat of a unique thing. You have kitchens that provide food for senior centers and other commercial activities. This is not like Arby's and McDonald's. This is kitchens that are producing typically for a segment of the community that has need, but they inevitably end up with leftover food. In the 4-county area that Seago covers, Seago purchased a food freeze dryer for each of those county units. So that leftover food can be freeze dried and preserved. What Graham County's discovered is there's a labeling problem. Is that once you freeze dry the food, you got to have the nutrition label on it, which means the analysis of the protein and carbohydrates and so forth. They're asking for a simplified label that would simply say, this is a roast beef sandwich or whatever it is, so you can tell what's in it. And it would only be for distribution to other nonprofits, but this would allow some of that waste to be preserved. I don't know yet whether this would have federal implications, but Graham County believes that at least a change in our Arizona statutes would be a beneficial start on trying to solve this problem. Gila County has 2. One is it was a problem I was not aware of, but that is that if a person, so a piece of land, and the example they gave has no utilities, no improvements whatsoever, so it's just a plot of land. If someone dies, then whoever inherits that land, the county may not know who that is. And what they're running into is some of these plots of land have become blighted. There may be an old rundown trailer or 2 or 10, old cars, and normally you say, okay, well, who's paying the taxes? We'll go to them and see if they'll clean it up. The trouble is on these kind of plots, if a person simply comes in and pays cash for their taxes, there's no provision in law to find out who they are. Anyone can walk in and do it. Here's cash, taxes are paid. And so what the county would like is there to be a requirement that once taxes are paid, that the person indicate who they are and how they can be contacted. They would like to begin, because there are some statutes that allow governments, both city and county, to impose some incentives, pretty strong incentives to clean up your property. But if you don't know who's there, you don't know where to apply the pressure. And so this would require identification of the person paying taxes. The next one I think is something we might well be wanting to get on board with. Kevin County is asking to streamline the process for local governments to purchase state land. It cannot be for a commercial purpose, so we couldn't, for example, go to state land and say, we buy that acre over there and put a Circle K on it and raise county revenue. But if we, for example, expanding a landfill, those kinds of clearly non-commercial public entity use, they would like to streamline the process. They would like to eliminate some of the environmental surveys and other costs that go on now. What typically happens is the person, the entity who would like to buy the land starts the process, and there's some costs involved. Once those costs have been incurred, eventually that piece of land would go up for auction. After the sale has taken place, then whoever wins the auction is supposed to reimburse the entity that fronted the cost. There's no timeline for that, and it takes some time, and in some cases it may not ever happen. But Gila County is asking one for those costs to be reduced or eliminated, and that public entities would not have to go through an auction process. They can simply get the appraisal done and buy it at the appraisal price. It would shorten the time frame, may or may not make it cheaper, but it would certainly streamline it and avoid some upfront costs.
We still make it possible.
It would make it possible, and you eliminate a lot of the risk where the county or city puts up a lot of effort to make a piece of property available, and then somebody goes in and buys it. The next two are from Coconino County. One is the first one is the recapitalization of the DFFM Wildfire Emergency Response Fund. This was a fund that was set up, I think it was 3 years ago. Is that correct, Chairman?
Yes.
And it was in response to some devastating fires. It was during the pandemic period, and there needed to be some quick remediation done. It was intended to be a 1-year budget item, and it was intended to address specific concerns. And you'll see if you see the breakdown overwhelmingly of $23 million that was spent. I think it was 11 and 8, 12 and 8. It's almost 20 million was Gila County and Coconino County. Now, it happened to be that in that particular year, they had the most devastating post-wildfire problems. The next year, it got included again.
Because of the skinny budget.
Because of the skinny budget, and it was essentially passed without debate on individual line items. Coconino County is pursuing this primarily because the state is much more responsive than the federal government. There's a fund that the federal government through FEMA that would address these very same concerns, but that may be an 18-month or 2-year process, whereas the state was reimbursing in a matter of months, or in some cases even weeks. The real policy rub here is, are we inviting the feds to cost shift to us? And we're not only inviting, we're actually saying we will provide the cost shift for you. And so while that pot of money certainly makes things quicker and easier, we're essentially telling the feds, you go ahead and shift your responsibility to us, we'll take it. And so I think that's where the rub will be from a policy point of view. The next one likewise doesn't affect Greeley County in as much as we don't have a military installation, but this would redefine the impact of a military installation. So you'll see periodically Luke Air Force Base, some of the bases down in Phoenix area primarily, not so much in Tucson, but in Pima County or Maricopa County, you'll hear these encroachment on, you get too close to the airport, those kind of things. This would define essentially a buffer zone around military installations. It would be called the zone of influence. For an airport where you're landing planes, that's somewhat obvious. For others, it may not be quite as obvious. But it would define those and then create some restrictions. One of which, for example, if you own property in a impact zone of military installation, you would be required when you sell to notify the seller that this is in that zone. It doesn't affect us directly in Greeley County. I think the rub on this one will be is how much do we want to affect more of the private property surrounding these installations. The last proposal is from Cochise County. There's the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission. That is a group, I think it is at 19 members. I may be wrong, but essentially it's an organization, and there are police organizations, prosecutors. There, I don't know who the other members are. It doesn't come to the top of my head, but it's all prosecution, law enforcement oriented folks. And they obtain grants, they distribute grants both to, our Greeley County receives grants from this organization. And it's intended to try to bolster the law enforcement response. The challenge is that when you increase funding for law enforcement and prosecution, you typically generate more cases. And that has to be handled by somebody. Typically, indigent defense offices in most counties, in the smaller counties, indigent defense contracts. There is no provision for getting grants for those groups. So essentially you increase the one size, but you don't increase the response. And of course, the Constitution requires that lawyers be provided for defendants accused of crime who can't afford their own. So this would simply ask that there be one more seat created on the ACJC that would be for an indigent defense bar, if you will, the criminal defense side of that equation. The hope is that maybe some grants could be directed that towards the defense bar, or simply that they be reminded as they go through this process that there's the other half of the criminal justice side or the criminal justice function. Those are the proposals that are out there. Like I say, some of them would have an effect on Greeley County, some of them really won't. Some of them are very clear policy decisions. Others, like I say, like the HERF distribution, we would probably win, but I'm not sure that it's really going to be about us. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I say that the same briefing will be given on Thursday. Obviously, we won't talk about it there in a Greeley County context specific way.
Yeah. I know I received a call from Matt Ryan from Coconino County on the two proposals they had yesterday, and I expressed my concern about the shifting of the cost to the state, and anyway, he appreciated the heads up, and that's so far the only one that's reached out.
I think this legislative proposal agenda recognizes that things are changing. Last year there was a giveaway. Every senator and House member got it was 20 million to come up with a way to spend. One-time money is going to be much lower. In fact, there may not be much of it. And for ongoing spending, some projections are that within fiscal year 25, we may be at a slight deficit. So there's just not the money to throw around that there has been. And most of these proposals reflect that. Now, the ones from Pima County, I think going to be pretty tough sledding. Even if there weren't philosophical differences between Pima and the legislature, I think you're running tough sledding simply because the money's it's going to be tight. And the state's already committed to some things like empowerment scholarships that are going to make it even tighter. Yeah. So.
But I just have a question. So on the wildfire emergency response, I mean, yes, it is a invitation for a cost shift, right, from federal to state, but that's what we're looking for is more state control, so it's a fine, it's a slippery slope, I guess. But we're looking for more state control, less federal involvement, streamline the process to allow people to be, you know, reimbursed quicker. But yeah, that's tough because it is a cost shift, so it's like you're getting what you're asking for local control, but then there's a cost
You're
shift.
paying for it, yeah.
Yeah,
I think in this particular realm in particular, now in some other areas like ADEQ, maybe not quite so much, but this area, the FFM is far more responsive, far more agile in responding to these things than the federal government is. And there's not nearly the level of bureaucracy, there's not nearly the level of environmental group activist interest. And so, yeah, there's no question it's more responsive. But essentially, Coconino's saying, let's go ahead and pick up the tag on this cost shift and we'll run with that.
so we'll get to hear a whole lot more about it.
Yes, you will. Coconino is passionate about it
Yeah.
and they've done a lot of homework on it. And so, and they've done, I think, Chairman's correct, I think they are the only ones who lobbied pre-summit of all these proposals.
But then philosophically, it's you're covering their responsibility, the federal responsibility, and you don't think that might start a snowball, and that's, I know the eco counties that, especially Chairman Whiting from Navajo County and I discussed this, and we're just afraid of the snowballing effect. Yes, the state's a lot easier to work with, but there again, you're taking a federal responsibility and the state paying for that. And
I
yes,
know.
your point is well taken, but
Who would you rather deal with, the EPA or ADEQ? Right, and that's kind of the.
depends on the situation.
This-
If I'm dealing with water, if I'm dealing with land and forest.
This situation, I would not be surprised to see split constituencies on this vote. You know, there's 1 of 3 vote one way, 2 the other way, or 2 of 5 and 3 of 5. You've laid out the conflict very effectively.
Yeah.
It may be a good idea that gets left on the cutting room floor simply because there's lack of money
Yeah,
this year. I don't know. And it may be a bad idea that gets left on the cutting room floor because there's not enough money.
true.
Whichever way you lean.
Point well taken.
Well,
And they will preach that.
I'm not supportive of it. I'm just saying that there's the.
That's good, because I begin to question.
There'll be a lot of discussion about it.
Yes, they will.
Unintended consequences for some of these acts.
Right.
And so we have to figure that out.
Yeah. And that was my point with Matt yesterday. And
One thing that's positive is at least this is defined. But you know, some of the Pima County proposals are undefined and some of them have no seating.
At least people will be there, it sounds like.
They will be there.
Historically, they haven't been.
Yeah, I think.
this is
maybe
the one.
That one guy, yeah.
Sheriff, yeah. They always send one, and to his credit, he's come every time.
Yeah.
And been very vocal, and it's good.
Can't remember his name, Scott, so,
Yes.
With Scott.
oh, right, okay,
Yeah, he's got 2 first names.
it's okay. yeah.
Is there any questions on agenda item 6?
No.
If not, we will go to agenda item 7. Turn time over to Derek Repair, County Administrator, and then Bianca, Clerk of the Board.
I would like first to go ahead and share again. An issue's come up. It's been recognized before. Oh, that's the wrong one. Let me pull up. Arizona has traditionally has been at the forefront of many election issues and reforms. For example, Arizona was one of the first states to really initiate early voting by mail and so forth. There's a very elaborate set of processes that are developed because of that, including registration deadlines, verifications. A person may come in to vote a ballot and they don't have their identification, so they have so many days to come in and cure the ballot. There's a lot of things that come up. Next year, in the presidential election year, because of the way the elections fall, and it's a matter of counters, because the primary election is set in August. I believe it's on the first Monday after first Monday after the first Tuesday. November's the same way. Well, that's creating a crunch between the primary and the general election. The other thing that has changed is in 2022, there was a law passed that expanded the margins for recounts, automatic recounts. So, whereas, for example, in a presidential race or a governor's race, it had to be within 200 votes. So we almost never saw automatic recounts. Candidates could go back, and if they were able to win a case in court, they could ask for a recount, but the automatic wasn't there. That margin has expanded greatly to, I think it's 1%. So in the 2022 election, in the general, there were 3 races that hit automatic recounts: the attorney general, the school superintendents, and a legislative race in the Maricopa County area that all went to automatic recount. They've gone back. The elections director, and I give kudos to our elections director, she's been a part of this discussion as well. But they've gone back historically and said, well, if these same margins were in play over the last half a dozen or 10 elections, primary and general, how many of them would have had an automatic recount? And they found that almost every one of them would have had at least one automatic recount. They did tend to occur on the legislative side, they tend to occur in the Maricopa County area. But the recount numbers have expanded for every race. So we could have arguably a precinct committee race or a local elected assessor recorder race that goes to automatic recount. What that does is it pushes all of the deadlines where we would be hard pressed to make it. Now, in Greeley County, if we had an automatic recount of just a local race, we could probably make that work. The real challenge comes when you have statewide recounts. So last year, well, let's say the presidential race comes down to a 5,000 vote margin. We're automatically recounting the presidential race. Every county in the state is automatically recounted. Once again, we can run ours fairly quickly, but we can't do our final processes until Maricopa, Mojave, Pima, Cochise, until they're all done as well. In the primary election, that causes a problem in getting what they call the UOCAVA. It's one, there's several deadlines. And I'll go through these here real quick. Because there's strict statutory deadlines on when certain things have to occur, and there's operational deadlines. Once again, we work with a printer. I think most of the counties work with 1 or 2 printers, don't they, to get ballots printed. Now, our situation is mitigated because we use vote centers, and so you do ballot on demand. But we still have to print out ballots for overseas voters, for early voters. So there's still a bunch of ballots we have to print. Well, if you get a recount in the primary, then we're going to be pressing to get those ballots printed for the general. The mailing to military and overseas ballot voters. There's also a process where you ballot proof. One, you recall in the primary election in 2022, Pinal County sent out 68,000 ballots that didn't have some local races on them. That's a proofing problem. You need to lay 2 or 3 sets of eyes on it and just look at it. Misspellings. The candidates have an opportunity to look at their names and say, is it misspelled? And so, and then on the general election side, it's submitting the electoral college electors to Congress under what they call safe harbor provisions. We'll talk about here in a second. Like I say, it's the issue is not new. There's always been provision for automatic recounts. What is new is the likelihood that we're going to have them on a statewide basis. Now, let's suppose that a legislative race goes to automatic recount. How does that affect Union County? Let's say it's in Maricopa County. It affects us because the entire statewide canvass can't take place until that's resolved. And so our legislative races, our local races, maybe there's not automatic recount there, but we can still be tripped up by something that occurs in another county. Don't be worried about the busyness of the slide here. It talks about different areas why, although there's 91 days between the primary and the general, you really have only 27 days because some of these things take time. Some of this, like I say, we can do a little bit quicker because we're more nimble because we're smaller. And we have the best elections director in the state. That helps. But some of it, we're going to be beholden to what takes place in larger jurisdictions. One of the things that may crop up here is some counties wanting to do some larger or expanded hand recounts. Even in those counties where it's been suggested, logistically, they're showing that it's not financially or logistically feasible. But I think there'll still be a push to do some of that. That all slows things down. You'll recall the delays out of Cochise County in the 2022 election. They simply weren't certifying. A lot of lawsuits involved. That all cuts into the ability to get an election wrapped up. So we're needing to find 19 calendar dates. Now that ours could probably be cut down from 19 a little bit, but we're still going to be short if there's an automatic recount. And our timeline will be affected by what goes on in other places. For the November, we need to find 17 calendar days. And what we're looking at is that December 10th safe harbor deadline. In other words, all states that have their elections wrapped up and they certify their electors and get them sent into the I not call it library and archives, that's the state version of it. But they get them sent in to Washington, then they're automatically counted. If you miss that deadline, there's not an automatic guarantee that it's counted. Now you recall again back in 2020, there were plenty of groups who wanted votes not to be counted. They wanted that electoral college chaos to be created because they wanted the election to throw into the House of Representatives to vote. So there is some potential disincentive to solve this problem, and that's one of the things we discussed at our managers meeting. It could be a concern. There's a buffet of different options to fix this. One of the easiest, we go back to the earlier, narrower recount. Nobody believes that's going to happen. I don't think that the legislature is ready to roll that back. They may someday, but probably not this time. So you could move the primary, for example, forward earlier in the year, maybe into July, earlier in August, maybe even into June. Some states have their primaries in May and in April. And primaries have been moved. One of the challenges would be working with tribes, primarily the I'm back.
You want to make sure we're still in the meeting before you continue on?
Yes. Are we back? Okay. The challenge, the reason I bring it up today under our legislative proposals is the discussion is to try and find a solution before the end of the year. Here's why. In fact, before November 15th. There's a 90-day lag from the time the governor signs a new piece of legislation until it becomes effective, unless you have an emergency clause. An emergency clause requires, I believe it's a 2/3 or 3/4 vote. It's a supermajority of the legislature to vote in favor of that to have it start immediately. There is little confidence, very little confidence that you could reach a supermajority in either house of the legislature. The ranker is too high. There's some very strongly entrenched ideological groups within each house of the legislature. And so what they're hoping to do is get to where you can pass it on majorities, 16 in the Senate, 31 in the House, and the governor sign it. And then have it be effective in time for presidential preference and the primary and general election phases. So there's a push right now. The discussions have already begun with House and Senate leadership. President Peterson, the president of the Senate, recognizes the problem. There was a worry that he may not be fully understanding of why there's a problem. And there's at least some positive reception to solving it somehow. The question becomes, which of those buffet of options do you choose to carve out enough space to meet the deadlines? And Maricopa County is taking lead on this. To his credit, Scott Jarrett, their elections director, and his staff have identified several areas where you could get some changes. If you change the recount margin, you solve the problem. Most likely. Could it still be within that little tiny window? It could, but it's unlikely. But if you don't change the recount margins, then you got to pick a combination of different levers to pull to make it work. And that's where the work is going on right now. What CSA is proposing is to pull this up here. Is to pass a resolution this week at the County Supervisors Association meeting that would essentially put the force of CSA and commit CSA to finding a solution to this problem. So if you're not going to be able to attend the meeting, I would ask that you get your proxy in. If you can attend either in person or online. But if you're not going to be able to attend on Thursday, please have a proxy in. But the proposal is, and you may have received a copy of this resolution already. If not, I'll give it to you after the meeting today. Is essentially that we would use our efforts as CSA to find a solution. This is the whereas clause, and it talks about the things we just talked about and the problems it creates. Therefore, CSA will work with ACO to work with the governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and the legislature to educate leaders on the problem, and then work as part of a coalition to identify, enact, and implement solutions that will allow all 15 counties more certainty in meeting statutory election deadlines when administering the 2024 cycle. Now, he said somewhat tongue-in-cheek, we have the best election director in the state. Let me take the tongue-in-cheek out of that. We do have one of the best. She's one of the most experienced elections director in the state. We run a very tight ship, and because of our size and because of the processes that build up over the years, we could do this and meet most of our deadlines, unless a statewide race or a presidential race or a legislative race somewhere else trips us up. And that's beyond our control. And that's why it really does affect every one of our 15 counties. And so that's what we're trying to guard against. That's the train derailment we're trying to prevent. And so I want to present that to you under our legislative discussions and ask that you consider voting on this at Thursday's meeting or giving your process if you can. And certainly stand for questions.
And Derek, I mean, we can meet our obligation on this, but it, all 15 counties have to have completed the same process for it to be valid. And that's what you're saying on a presidential or a statewide race. But we could still do our part of it, but we can't, it won't become valid until all 15 counties have completed theirs. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what you're hearing. And that becomes particularly acute in the presidential race, but I mean, there's a senatorial race, there's US representative races all throughout the state. Any one of those, it could be a corporation commission election, they could trip us up.
Right.
And it could be a ballot measure that's not even a candidate. Something the legislature referred or citizens have petitioned to get on the ballot. If it finishes neck and neck, we're the same process. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
If there's not, is that all that you have?
Also, we touch on budget issues. It's important to recognize that the litigation costs, which are over $200,000, aren't because the sheriff decided to sue. And that's a cost that, regardless how they're attributed, our taxpayers are paying. And that's information that, in consultation with the chairman, we thought should be on the agenda. It's not a discussion action item. It's simply information out there, and for better or for worse, the costs are going to go up. And the issues are fundamental to county budgeting processes around the state. It's not the kind of thing that the board can take lightly, and the board is not taking it lightly. And the board has engaged attorneys to handle that very important argument well. Other counties around the state often comment to each of us when we gather, me as a manager, you as board members, about what's going on, why this is going on, what's the current state. Those are questions I field every time I get together with other county managers and administrators. So that single cost is to the taxpayers of Green County. And it's because the sheriff chose to sue. And that's all I have on that.
Okay, thank you. Bianca?
Today, the 19th, our board meeting. This week, we have, you guys have small counties, Eagle with on the 20th tomorrow, and then CSA on the 21st, Thursday. That's all I have for the month of September. Going into October, the WIR meeting. And then our first board meeting in October is pushed back to the 5th on Thursday. Renzi had their fall breaks from the 2nd to the 13th. We have our CSA Legislative Summit from the 11th through the 13th. With on the 18th, and then our second board meeting, October 24th.
And if I won't be any to the pre-summit activities in Flagstaff. I've been asked to testify at the Arizona Corporation Commission on behalf of DVEC. And I'll be there that evening.
And that's all I have for October. November 7th, our first board meeting, county managers on the 10th.
Bianca,
Yes.
I see the 7th is election day. Is that going to affect you? Do we?
No, we don't have an election. This-
Okay, I just.
So we're good.
We all bring the big sign.
And then on Veterans Day, Saturday, the 11th is the 7th annual suicide walk for Cody. The 15th, Small Counties, Eco and WIFA, CSA Board of Directors on the 16th, and then Eco meeting on the 17th. Our second board meeting, November 21st, and then the offices will be closed the 23rd and 24th for Thanksgiving.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should also probably note that although we don't switch for daylight savings, so many of our partners right across the line to our east do, that's something to note. And we will probably add the Clifton 150 and the Modest Bluff celebration on the 4th.
Nobody, anybody else, but it's shocking to see Thanksgiving on the calendar already. It's like, gosh, time flies.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to the calendar? And Bianca, thank you for putting this calendar together for us every month and making the corrections that we make. Seems like meetings are always being moved, but thank you. If not, we will go to agenda item 8. A motion would be in order.
So moved that we approve the consent agenda is posted.
I'll second that.
A motion is second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Before we go into agenda item, okay, we'll do 9.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Gomez.
I have one thing else. The Seago organization has finally chosen their next executive director, and that's Keith Dennis. With him, he's
Keith Dennis.
yeah, he's part of Seago.
A long time friend of being a child.
Yeah. So I just thought I'd mention that, we have a lot of connections with him, and I believe he's going to do an excellent job. And he's got some big shoes to fill with Randy being there since '09. But Randy's retiring on December 16th, and he's taking Keith under his wing from now till then. And I believe Keith is going to do an excellent job for us. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
No, I don't have anything for this meeting. Got a meeting after this one, but
Yeah, the only thing I have to report is first of all, I thought the Greene County Fair went well. The sale was through the roof. And I want to thank all those involved, the employees that stepped up to make that event go well. Tony, as far as keeping the grounds and the bathrooms clean, your staff did an excellent job. I was very pleased. But once again, at least in the animal barn, things went very well. It was very well attended. So I'm going to be interested to see what the numbers are. But we appreciate those that took so much time to make sure that that was a successful event. And other than that, that's the only thing I have. Before we go to agenda item 10, let's take a short break and then we'll come back and go into executive session. Progress. Okay, we'll come back into regular session. We'll go to, we're back into. We left executive session, okay, we're back in regular session. We go to agenda item 11 and Sheriff Tim Sumner.
Hello, Tim Sumner, Greeley County Sheriff. Mr. Chairman, members of the board and staff. On this item here, was looking to consider me being able to spend up to $2,000 for reward monies according with this law, ARS 11-251.25 in one case, and this would be in reference to our Greeley County Sheriff's Office report 2308-0082. This statute provides for reward money for information leading to the arrest and conviction of persons charged with a crime. And so it's not simply just for the information, it's for the information leading to the arrest and conviction of someone involved with this case that we're looking at. So that's what I would like to see if the board would authorize me to spend up to $2,000. You can see on the agenda request form that would be coming out of the sheriff's budget under the miscellaneous account is what I'd be looking to spend this money out of if it became that we had someone that came forth and we needed to give them this reward money. So that's all that I have.
Any questions? If not, a motion to be in order.
Well,
Why would we approve to authorize the sheriff to offer a reward in accordance with ARS 11-251.25 in one case, Greeley County Sheriff's Office report number 2308-0082 in the amount not to exceed $2,000.
I second that motion.
And motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, motion passes. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
We'll now go to, there being no further agenda items, this meeting is now adjourned.